Hello! This episode will be discussing the underappreciated classic, The Iron Giant. Loosely based on the 1968 Ted Hughes novel, The Iron Giant was directed and co-written by Brad Bird, who would go on to work with Pixar on The Incredibles and Ratatouille. Set in the American state of Maine during 1957, with the Cold War in full swing, the film follows Hogarth, who stumbles across a giant mechanical man from another world. But this giant isn't hostile in the slightest. All he desires is to sate his hunger for metal and satisfy his curiosity. The film shows us the gradual evolution and growth of Hogarth and the giant's relationship, while also exploring the paranoia and xenophobia of the US during these tense times. Once again, this video will assume you have seen the film, so I'm not going to catch people up on details they should already know, unless I need to draw attention to certain elements. And of course, there will be spoilers.
You know, Hogarth, we live in a strange and wondrous time. The atomic age. But there's a dark side to progress, Hogarth. Ever hear of Sputnik?
Yeah, it's the first satellite in space.
Foreign satellite, Hogarth. And all that implies. Even now, it orbits overhead. Boop, boop, watching us. We can't see it, but it's there. Much like that giant thing in the woods. We don't know what it is or what it can do. I don't feel safe, Hogarth. Do you?
The Iron Giant manages to skillfully extract both humour and serious drama from America's attitude towards the looming threat of atomic war. And no one else in the film better represents that than Kent Mansley.
You think this middleman is fun, but who built it? The Russians, the Chinese, Martians, Canadians? I don't care! All I know is we didn't build it, and that's reason enough to assume the worst and blow it to kingdom come.
In so many ways, this guy is a complete clown. He's pompous, paranoid, and the worst kind of idiot. So of course, he's the perfect metaphor for the ridiculous views being spread by certain parts of American culture at this time. But the film quickly reminds you that while people like Mansley can appear to be simply comical, these individuals are dangerous. Mansley threatens and interrogates a child because he is so convinced what he is doing is right. His fear and paranoia drives him to commit an act that threatens the lives of people he is supposedly there to protect. Mansley is terrified of the unknown.
You are going to tell me about this thing, you are going to lead me to it, and we are going to destroy it before it destroys us!
It is foreign, so thus it is a threat.
It's dead.
The Iron Giant has an extremely potent anti-gun message at its core. The giant himself is essentially a sentient weapon capable of unleashing a, quite frankly, terrifying amount of firepower. But one scene in the film has Hogarth and the giant directly deal with the concept of mortality after seeing hunters shoot and kill a deer. One of the most touching moments in the film is when Hogarth tries to comfort the giant after the event.
I know you feel bad about the deer, but it's not your fault. Things die. It's part of life. It's bad to kill, but it's not bad to die.
Kill? Die?
Well, yes, someday.
I die?
I don't know.
After his first exposure to firearms, the giant now associates them with the death of something beautiful. So when Dean calls the giant a gun after he accidentally uses his powers and nearly harms Hogarth, the giant becomes incredibly upset. In his eyes, there is nothing more horrible than the thought of being a gun. Throughout, the film emphasises how ugly and scary firearms and violence in general are. But one scene in particular hammers this point home.
It's still alive! Shoot at it!
When the giant mistakenly believes Hogarth has died and goes insane with grief and begins unleashing every weapon at his disposal on the soldiers firing at him, the beauty and the soul of the giant disappears. After his initial outburst of rage, the violence being unleashed on the American troops is done so in a scarily detached manner. In his deformed state, half of the giant's face is covered, and his eyes lose all expression. He's not a living thing with a soul anymore in this state. He's just a weapon. The gun within the giant has destroyed what makes him beautiful. Thankfully, he snaps out of it.
So, where are you from? You came from the sky, right? From up there? Don't you remember anything?
As I've already hinted at, one of the biggest challenges the Iron Giant faces during the movie isn't a physical threat, but an existential crisis. Due to the bump on his head sustained on his arrival to Earth, the giant doesn't know who he is or why he exists. In fact, we as an audience never truly find out where he came from and what his original purpose was. Throughout the film, the giant and Hogarth discuss a lot of weighty subject matter, such as death, the nature of the soul, and the subject of identity. All of these conversations aid the giant in his internal journey. A phrase that gets repeated is, "You are who you choose to be." By not revealing the giant's origin, the film actually helps reinforce this theme. Because it shouldn't matter where the giant came from, or what others wanted or intended him to be. What matters is the individual standing in front of us and who he chooses to be. Hogarth introduces the giant to Superman, and the concept of the Man of Steel is then brought up continually. The idea of a being of great power from another world, who embraces a culture and a people who are not his own, and uses his abilities to protect them, starts to resonate with the giant. In the film's final moments, when the town looks like it's going to be destroyed due to one man's stupidity, the Iron Giant finally knows who he wants to be.
Superman.
Now, of course, it turns out the giant didn't die after all, and the film chooses to end proceedings on a more upbeat note. But this in no way dulls the impact of the giant's choice to sacrifice himself, because it's not just about him choosing to end his life for the greater good, it's about him finally having the answers to questions that have plagued him and discovering a purpose of his own making. I'm a huge fan of all of Brad Bird's work, but The Iron Giant in my mind is his masterpiece. It manages to be a fun, accessible family film while also exploring some complex issues that most Western animated films wouldn't touch. I eagerly await whatever Brad Bird works on next, whether it be with Pixar or someone else. Thank you for watching.